The morning of December 21st, 1939. The temperature hovers at 40 degrees below 0 Celsius in the forests near Kollaa, eastern Finland. A Soviet infantry column, 200 men in brown greatcoats, moves through snow that reaches their knees. They have no snowshoes. The Red Army did not issue them. They trudge forward in a line, exposed, dark shapes against endless white. Behind a snowbank, 150 meters distant, a man lies completely still. He has been in this position since 3 hours before dawn. His name is Simo Häyhä, a 28-year-old corporal in the Finnish Army's 6th Company, 34th Infantry Regiment. He is 5 feet 3 inches tall. He weighs perhaps 130 pounds. In his hands he holds a Finnish-made Sakko M2830 rifle, a variant of the Mosin Nagant. The stock is carved from Arctic birch that will not warp in extreme cold. There is no telescopic sight mounted on the weapon, only iron sights, the simple V-notch rear sight and the blade front sight that Finnish hunters have used for generations. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Häyhä's breathing is controlled, slow, deliberate. In his mouth he holds a small amount of snow packed against his cheeks. This prevents his breath from condensing in the frigid air, prevents the telltale fog that would mark his position. His rifle barrel rests on a packed mound of snow he constructed in darkness, positioned to prevent the muzzle blast from throwing up a puff that might betray him. He has wrapped himself in a white camouflage smock over his winter uniform. Against the snow he is invisible. The Soviet soldiers do not see him. They cannot see him. He aims at the first man in the column. The iron sights align, front blade centered in the rear notch, the top of the blade level with the top of the notch. Target visible just above. He has made this sight picture 10,000 times in his life, hunting elk and white-tailed deer in these same forests. The rifle reports. The sound is sharp, flat, absorbed quickly by the snow. The first Soviet soldier drops. The column stops. Men look around, confused, seeking the source of the shot. Häyhä works the bolt. Extract, eject, load, close, lock. The action is smooth, practiced, unconscious. The rifle is already back on target. Second shot. Another Soviet falls. Now the column breaks. Men scatter, seeking cover behind trees, dropping into the snow. But there is little cover in this section of forest. The trees are too thin, too widely spaced. Häyhä fires again, and again. Each shot is aimed. Each shot finds its mark. Within 3 minutes, 25 Soviet soldiers lie dead or dying in the snow. The survivors retreat, running, stumbling through the deep drifts back toward their own lines. Häyhä does not pursue. He remains motionless, behind his snowbank for another hour, watching, waiting, ensuring no one returns. Then, as twilight approaches at 2 in the afternoon, winter darkness comes early this far north, he withdraws, moving low, using terrain, invisible. By the time full darkness falls, he is back in Finnish lines, reporting to his company commander. 25 confirmed kills. December 21st, 1939. His highest single-day tally of the war. This is the reality of Simo Häyhä's combat experience. This is how the man who would be credited with more than 500 enemy kills in less than 100 days of fighting conducted his work. And the remarkable, almost incomprehensible aspect of his effectiveness was not superhuman ability or exotic equipment or secret techniques unknown to military science. It was the deliberate choice to use the simplest, most basic rifle sights available. Iron sights, open sights. The same sights that millions of hunters and target shooters had used for a century. While other nations' snipers were equipping themselves with increasingly sophisticated telescopic optics, magnifying their targets, extending their effective range, Häyhä achieved the highest confirmed kill count of any sniper in any major war using sights that offered no magnification whatsoever. To understand why this worked, why this counterintuitive choice made him more effective rather than less, requires understanding the context of the Winter War and the specific conditions under which Häyhä fought. The Winter War began on November 30th, 1939, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland. The pretext was manufactured. A border incident near the village of Mainila, where Soviet artillery allegedly came under Finnish fire. Most historians agree the Soviets shelled their own positions to create justification for invasion. Stalin wanted Finnish territory. Specifically, he demanded Finland cede the Karelian Isthmus, a strip of land that would provide a buffer zone protecting Leningrad, and grant the Soviet Union military bases on Finnish soil. Finland refused. The Soviet leadership expected a swift victory. Their intelligence assessments predicted the Finnish military would collapse within weeks. Why would they not? Finland had a population of 3,700,000 people. The Soviet Union had 170 million. Finland mobilized approximately 320,000 soldiers for the defense. The Soviets committed somewhere between 450,000 and 760,000 troops to the invasion, depending on which phase of the war and which historical source one consults. The Soviet force included 6,000 tanks. Finland had 32 tanks at the start of the war. The Soviets deployed 3,000 aircraft. Finland had 114. On paper, the Red Army should have reached Helsinki within a fortnight, but the Red Army of 1939 was not the Red Army that would later defeat Nazi Germany. Stalin's purges of 1937 and 38 had devastated the officer corps. Thousands of experienced military leaders were executed or sent to the Gulag on charges of treason, espionage, and counter-revolutionary activity. The survivors were politically reliable, but tactically incompetent. They were afraid to show initiative, afraid to question orders, afraid of being accused of defeatism if they reported problems. The result was a military force numerically massive but organizationally dysfunctional. Soviet soldiers were equipped for conventional warfare in temperate conditions. They wore brown greatcoats that stood out starkly against snow. They had no specialized winter equipment, no snowshoes, inadequate cold weather gear. Frostbite casualties in some Soviet units exceeded combat casualties. The logistics system could not supply troops operating in the Finnish wilderness. Roads were few. Supply columns became stranded in snowdrifts. Ammunition and food failed to reach forward units. Soviet doctrine emphasized mass assault, overwhelming firepower, rapid advances along main roads. But the Karelian terrain offered few roads. What roads existed were narrow, winding, easily blocked. Forests were dense, swamps, frozen but treacherous, extended for miles. The Finns knew this terrain intimately. They knew which paths to take, which frozen lakes would support the weight of men and supplies, where to position defensive positions to maximize the effectiveness of limited forces. They dressed entirely in white. Not just white uniforms, but white camouflage smocks, white balaclavas, white mittens. Against the snow, they were almost invisible. They used mobility, striking Soviet columns with sudden attacks, inflicting casualties, then withdrawing before the Soviets could bring their superior firepower to bear. They employed motti tactics, a Finnish word meaning a measured stack of firewood. The tactic involved allowing Soviet columns to advance deep into Finnish territory along roads, then cutting the column into segments, surrounding each segment, and destroying it piecemeal. Soviet units, trapped, unable to maneuver in deep snow, became easy targets for Finnish infantry and machine gun fire. Into this environment came the Soviet conscript infantry, young men from Ukraine, Belarus, Central Russia, many of whom had never seen combat, poorly trained, inadequately equipped, led by officers who were more concerned with political correctness than tactical effectiveness. And waiting for them, hidden in the snow, were Finnish soldiers like Simo Häyhä, men who had grown up in these forests, who knew how to survive in extreme cold, who could move silently through snow, who could shoot accurately at ranges most soldiers would consider impossible with iron sights. Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905, in the village of Kiiskinen in the Rautjärvi municipality of southern Finland. His family were Lutheran farmers. He was the second youngest of 8 children. His childhood was typical for rural Finland in the early 20th century. He attended school, helped with farm work, and spent considerable time hunting in the surrounding forests. Hunting was not sport in the sense that wealthy Europeans understood it. It was subsistence. Elk, white-tailed deer, rabbits, game birds. These animals provided meat for the winter when farm produce was unavailable. A successful hunt might mean the difference between adequate nutrition and hunger during the months when temperatures remained below freezing for weeks at a time. Häyhä became a skilled shot by necessity. He learned to judge distances by eye, to account for wind, to control his breathing, to fire accurately with iron sights at ranges extending to several hundred meters. By his late teenage years, his farmhouse was filled with trophies from shooting competitions. In 1925, at age 19, Häyhä entered mandatory military service. All Finnish men were required to serve 15 months. He was assigned to a bicycle battalion, mobile infantry that could deploy quickly along Finland's limited road network. His superiors recognized his shooting ability and recommended him for non-commissioned officer training. He attended the National NCO Academy and graduated with the rank of corporal. In 1927, he received formal sniper training at the military's WWII training center. His instructors noted his exceptional ability to judge distances accurately without instruments. They also noted his patience, his willingness to remain in position for hours without moving, his methodical approach to selecting firing positions. After completing his military service, Häyhä returned to farming and hunting. He joined the Civil Guard, a Finnish militia organization, and participated regularly in shooting competitions. When the Finnish military adopted the Sako M28-30 rifle in the early 1930s, Civil Guard members were given the option to purchase their service rifles. Häyhä bought his serial number 35281. It became the rifle he knew better than any other piece of equipment he owned. He fired thousands of rounds through it, learning its peculiarities, memorizing how it shot at different ranges, in different wind conditions, in different temperatures. When the Soviet Union invaded Finland in November 1939, Häyhä mustered with the 6th Company of the 34th Infantry Regiment. He insisted on keeping his own rifle rather than accepting a new issue weapon. His commanders, recognizing his experience and skill, agreed. The rifle Häyhä carried into combat was not special by military standards. It was a Finnish variant of the Russian Mosin Nagant, chambered in 7.62 by 53 mm. The Sako version featured improved manufacturing, quality, a better barrel, more precise headspace tolerances. But fundamentally, it was a bolt-action rifle that had entered service in the 1890s. 5-round magazine, manual operation, no automatic or semi-automatic capability, and, critically, no telescopic sight. Häyhä's rifle was equipped with standard iron sights, a simple V-notch rear sight adjustable for elevation, a blade front sight. This was the equipment that would make him the deadliest sniper in military history. The choice to use iron sights rather than a telescopic sight was deliberate. Häyhä had specific, practical reasons rooted in the conditions of the Winter War and the tactics he employed. The first reason was optical reliability in extreme cold. Telescopic sights available in the late 1930s were prone to fogging and freezing in sub-zero conditions. Snipers hide. The winter of 1939-40 was exceptionally cold, with the Karelian Isthmus experiencing a record low temperature of -43 degrees Celsius on January 16, 1940. At these temperatures, moisture inside a telescopic sight would freeze, rendering the optics useless. Condensation would fog the lenses. Ice crystals would form on interior surfaces. A scope that worked perfectly at the proving ground in temperate conditions became a liability in Arctic warfare. Iron sights, by contrast, had no glass components that could fog or freeze. They were simple pieces of machined steel. Temperature had no effect on their function. A Finnish soldier could lie in the snow for hours at -40 degrees, and when he raised his rifle to fire, the sights would work exactly as designed. The second reason was optical signature. An optical sight could catch the light and give away a sniper's position. A glint of sunlight off the glass could be enough to alert Soviet soldiers to Häyhä's location, turning the hunter into the hunted. Sniper's hide. The physics of this were straightforward. Glass lenses, even with anti-reflective coatings, which were primitive in the 1930s, would reflect light. In the low-angle winter sun of Finland, where daylight lasted only 6 hours at the peak of winter, sunlight could strike a scope at almost horizontal angles. A reflection visible for a fraction of a second could draw counter-sniper fire or artillery bombardment. Häyhä understood this implicitly. He had spent years hunting in these forests. He knew how light behaved in this environment. He knew that stealth was more valuable than magnification. The third reason was profile height. Using a telescopic sight required a shooter to lift their head a couple of inches higher than normal to look through the lens, increasing their chances of being spotted or shot. Snipers hide lever guns. With iron sights, Häyhä could stay lower, pressed close to the ground, hidden behind snowbanks and brush. His effective silhouette was smaller. In the flat terrain of the Karelian forests, where cover was limited, every centimetre of height reduction mattered. A sniper who raised his head too high became a target. A sniper who remained low survived. The fourth reason was familiarity. Häyhä did not have prior training with scoped rifles and therefore preferred not to switch to the Soviet scoped rifle. Sniper's hide. He had grown up using iron sights. His muscle memory, his sense of sight picture, his understanding of how to judge distance and wind and holdover, all of this was developed with iron sights. Switching to a telescopic sight would require retraining, practice, and adjustment. In the middle of a war, with Soviet forces pouring across the border, there was no time for that. He used what he knew best. The rifle itself was exceptional for its purpose. The Saco M2830 was manufactured at the Saco factory in Riihimäki, Finland. It was a refined variant of the Mosin Nagant M1891, incorporating improvements developed by Finnish gunsmiths over decades. The barrel was hammer-forged, providing superior accuracy compared to the standard Russian Mosin Nagant. The action was hand-fitted, with tighter tolerances that reduced play and improved consistency. The trigger was lighter, crisper, breaking at approximately 3 to 4 pounds of pressure compared to the heavier, grittier triggers on standard military rifles. The stock was carved from Arctic birch, a dense hardwood that resisted warping in temperature extremes and moisture. Finnish gunsmiths understood that wood would absorb moisture from snow and humidity, then dry out in heated interiors, causing dimensional changes that would shift the point of impact. Arctic birch minimized these effects. The stock design included a pistol grip that improved control and a cheek piece that provided consistent head placement for the iron sights. Häyhä's competition-grade SACO M2830 rifle was equipped with standard sights, M14 Forum. The rear sight was a simple V-notch, adjustable for elevation using a ladder mechanism. The front sight was a blade, approximately 2 mm wide at the tip. This sight picture required proper alignment. The shooter centered the front blade in the V-notch, ensured the top of the blade was level with the top of the notch, and placed the target just above this alignment. At 100 meters, this sight picture was accurate to within a few centimeters. If the shooter did his part, Häyhä did his part. On one occasion, Major Tapio Saarelainen witnessed Häyhä accurately hit a target some 500 feet away, hitting that target a staggering 16 times in just 1 minute. Sniper's hide 500 feet is approximately 150 meters. 16 shots in 60 seconds meant reloading the 5-round magazine 3 times while maintaining accuracy. The math revealed Häyhä's capability. Each shot took an average of 3.75 seconds. This included the time to acquire the target, aim, fire, work the bolt to extract and eject the spent cartridge, load a fresh round, close the bolt, reacquire the target through iron sights, and fire again. After every 5th shot, he had to drop the magazine, insert a fresh one, chamber a round, and continue firing, all while maintaining sufficient accuracy to hit a man-sized target at 150 meters. This was not luck. This was mastered skill, developed through thousands of repetitions. The ammunition Häyhä used was standard Finnish military issue, 7.62mm by 53mm rimmed cartridge. The bullet weighed approximately 12 grams, traveling at roughly 800 meters per second. At close range, within 200 meters, the trajectory was relatively flat. Beyond that, the shooter needed to account for bullet drop, windage, and the effects of temperature on powder burn rate. Häyhä knew these variables instinctively. He had hunted in these conditions for years. He understood how cold affected bullet performance, how wind pushed projectiles, how to estimate range by eye. His equipment was simple. Beyond his rifle, he carried a white camouflage smock made from lightweight cotton fabric. Finnish quartermasters issued these to troops operating in snow. The smock covered his uniform completely, breaking up his outline against the white background. He wore a white balaclava that covered his head and face, leaving only his eyes exposed. His mittens were white. His boots were white canvas wrapped around standard military footwear. He became part of the landscape. Soviet soldiers searching for him saw nothing but snow and trees. His other equipment included a hunting knife, standard military issue, a canteen for water, though he often melted snow in his mouth rather than risk the sound of drinking from a canteen. A small amount of food, typically hard bread and sausage that would not freeze solid, a compass for navigation, and, most importantly, patience. Häyhä could remain motionless for hours. He would select a position before dawn, dig into the snow, arrange his firing rest, pack snow around himself to eliminate any gaps that might show his outline, and wait. He waited for Soviet patrols to pass. He waited for targets to present themselves. He waited for the perfect shot. Then he fired, worked the bolt, and fired again. His tactical approach was methodical. He never fired from the same position twice in succession. After engaging targets, he would withdraw, move to a different location, and establish a new position. This prevented Soviet forces from pinpointing his location and calling artillery fire on him. He selected positions with multiple escape routes, ensuring he could withdraw quickly if counter-snipers or infantry attempted to assault his position. He studied Soviet movement patterns, learning their habits, their routes, their timing. Soviet forces moved predictably, following roads and trails, congregating in clearings, forming up in columns that made excellent targets. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. On December 21, 1939, Häyhä reportedly killed 25 Soviet soldiers in a single day. Snipers hide lever guns. This was not a single engagement. It was a series of calculated shots taken over the course of the short winter day. The incident occurred in the forests near Kollaa, a small village that had become a focal point of Finnish defensive operations. Soviet forces were attempting to break through Finnish lines in this sector, committing battalion-strength infantry formations supported by artillery and armour. The Finnish 6th Company, 34th Infantry Regiment, was holding a defensive position along a narrow front, outnumbered but well-positioned in terrain that favoured the defender. Häyhä moved into position in the partat, pre-dawn darkness. He had scouted this location the previous day, identifying a snowbank that provided cover and concealment, while offering a clear field of fire across an open area Soviet forces would need to cross. He dug into the snow, creating a shallow depression that lowered his profile. He packed additional snow around himself, leaving only a small gap for his rifle barrel. He waited. At approximately 8 o'clock in the morning, with twilight just beginning to illuminate the forest, a Soviet infantry column appeared. 200 men moving in a loose formation. They were visible from a considerable distance, their brown greatcoats contrasting sharply against the snow. They had no scouts ahead of the main body, no flankers moving through the trees to either side. Just a column of men walking forward, trusting in their numbers and their orders. Häyhä estimated the range at 150 meters. Well within his capability, he selected his first target, a soldier near the front of the column, who appeared to be an officer based on his position and the way other soldiers oriented toward him. Häyhä aligned his sights, front blade centered in the rear notch, top of the blade level. target visible just above. He controlled his breathing. Slow exhale. Natural respiratory pause. He pressed the trigger. The rifle fired. The report was sharp but quickly absorbed by the snow and trees. The Soviet officer dropped. For a moment, the column didn't react. Then soldiers began looking around, confused, seeking the source of the shot. Some dropped to the ground. Others ran toward the tree line seeking cover. Häyhä worked the bolt. The spent cartridge ejected, tumbling into the snow beside him. A fresh round fed from the magazine into the chamber. He closed the bolt, found his next target, and fired. A second Soviet soldier fell. Now the column was in chaos. Men were running in different directions, some toward the trees, some back the way they had come. Some stood frozen, unsure what to do. Häyhä fired again. And again. His ammunition held 5 rounds. After the 5th shot, he dropped the empty magazine, inserted a fresh one from his pocket, chambered a round, and continued firing. The Soviets could not locate him. His white camouflage rendered him invisible against the snow. His position was well chosen, offering no obvious landmarks that would help identify where the fire was coming from. The sound of the shots echoed through the forest, making directional determination difficult. Some Soviet soldiers began firing blindly toward the Finnish lines, spraying bullets into the trees without specific targets. This accomplished nothing except wasting ammunition and revealing their positions to other Finnish defenders who opened fire with machine guns and rifles. The engagement lasted approximately 3 minutes. By the time the surviving Soviet soldiers had retreated or found cover, 25 men lay dead or wounded in the snow. Häyhä had fired approximately 30 rounds, achieving a hit rate of over 80%. He remained in position for another hour, watching, waiting to see if the Soviets would return or attempt to recover their casualties. They did not. Eventually, Häyhä withdrew, moving carefully through the forest to a different position, covering his tracks, erasing evidence of his presence. This was a single engagement on a single day. Across the entire Winter War, Häyhä repeated this pattern hundreds of times. By March 1940, his confirmed kill count had reached 505, although some estimates suggest it may have been as high as 542. Snipers hide. These numbers were confirmed through Finnish military records, documented by his company commander, and verified through after-action reports. They did not include probable kills, wounded enemies, or targets engaged with his submachine gun in close quarters fighting. 505. Confirmed kills with his rifle alone. Over the course of approximately 100 days of combat, this averaged 5 kills per day, but the distribution was not even. Some days Häyhä did not engage at all, remaining in position but finding no suitable targets. Other days, like December 21st, he eliminated 25 enemies in a few hours. The psychological impact on Soviet forces was severe. Soviet troops soon assigned Häyhä an appropriately sinister nickname, White Death, Sniper's Hide. They feared him. They feared the unseen sniper who could kill them from positions they could not identify. Soviet commanders issued orders forbidding unnecessary movement during daylight hours. They directed artillery fire at suspected sniper positions, expending thousands of shells attempting to eliminate a single man. They tried everything, pummeling Häyhä's presumed locations with artillery fire. Soviets also employed counter-sniping, flooding an area with snipers whose primary mission was to kill the White Death. Lever guns. None of these measures were effective. Häyhä's tactics, his use of iron sights, his camouflage, and his understanding of the terrain made him nearly impossible to locate and eliminate. The broader context of Häyhä's success was the catastrophic performance of Soviet forces during the Winter War. The Winter War left 25,904 Finns dead. The Soviets lost at least 126,875 soldiers. Warfare History Network War History Online. More recent research by Russian historians has placed Soviet casualties even higher. Yuri Kilin, a Russian historian who specializes in Russian-Finnish conflicts, conducted a project from 2006 to 2009 attempting to get a clearer picture of Soviet losses. The project documented 138,551 irretrievable losses, plus 206,538 sanitary losses, giving a total casualty figure of 345,089. War History Online. This represented a casualty rate unprecedented in modern warfare for an attacking force against a defender with vastly inferior numbers and equipment. The Finns mobilized approximately 320,000 soldiers. The Soviets committed somewhere between 450,000 and 760,000 troops depending on the phase of the war. The numerical advantage was between 1.5 to 1 and 2.4 to 1. Yet Soviet casualties exceeded Finnish casualties by a ratio of 5 to 1 or more. The reasons for this disparity were multiple and interconnected. In the years leading up to the Soviet invasion of Finland, the purge of the Soviet military during Stalin's Great Terror left the army's command structure in disarray. Warfare History Network, thousands of experienced officers, had been executed or sent to the Gulag. The survivors were politically reliable but tactically incompetent. They issued orders that made no sense given the terrain and conditions. They committed divisions to attacks along single roads, where they could be surrounded and destroyed. They failed to coordinate infantry with armor and artillery. They sent men forward in mass formations that presented excellent targets for Finnish machine gunners and riflemen. Soviet soldiers were equipped for conventional warfare in temperate conditions. Soviet soldiers wore brown greatcoats that stood out starkly against snow. They had no specialized winter equipment, no snowshoes, inadequate cold weather gear. Frostbite casualties in some Soviet units exceeded combat casualties. Warfare History Network. Men lost fingers and toes to frostbite. They developed hypothermia while attempting to dig defensive positions in frozen ground. They could not maneuver effectively in deep snow, reducing their mobility to a fraction of what doctrine assumed. Finnish soldiers, by contrast, had grown up in this environment. They had winter uniforms, snowshoes, and skis. They moved through the forest with ease while Soviet forces floundered. The Soviet logistics system collapsed under the strain of Arctic warfare. Supply columns became stranded in snowdrifts. Trucks and vehicles broke down in extreme cold. Fuel froze. Food shipments failed to reach forward units. Ammunition reserves ran low. Soviet soldiers went hungry while fighting in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Finnish logistics, while limited, were more effective because they were designed for this environment. The Finns used horses and sleds to move supplies. They established supply depots hidden in forests. They operated on interior lines of communication, moving supplies shorter distances than the Soviets. Soviet tactical doctrine emphasized mass assault and overwhelming firepower. In the Karelian forests, this doctrine failed, catastrophically. Roads were few and narrow. Armor could not maneuver off-road. Infantry confined to roads became targets for Finnish ambushes. The Finns developed motti tactics specifically to exploit Soviet vulnerabilities. The Battle of Raate Road, which occurred during the month-long Battle of Suomussalmi, resulted in one of the largest Soviet losses in the Winter War. The Soviet 44th Division and parts of the 163rd Rifle Division, comprising about 14,000 troops, were almost completely destroyed by a Finnish ambush as they marched along the forest road. The Finns allowed the Soviet column to advance deep into Finnish territory, then cut the road behind them, isolating the force. They divided the column into segments, surrounded each segment, and destroyed it over the course of several days. Soviet troops, unable to maneuver in deep snow, unable to receive supplies or reinforcements, froze and starved, while Finnish ski troops attacked them, repeatedly. The survivors surrendered or died. The Finns captured thousands of weapons, hundreds of vehicles, and enormous quantities of supplies. This pattern repeated across multiple sectors. Soviet divisions advanced along roads. Finns cut them off. Soviet forces became trapped, immobilized, and were methodically destroyed. The disparity between Finnish and Soviet effectiveness was so pronounced that it shocked observers worldwide. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said of the ongoing war in January 1940, "Finland shows what free men can do. Everyone can see how communism rots the soul of a nation, how it makes it abject and hungry in peace and proves it base and abominable in war." Warfare History Network. The statement was politically charged, reflecting Churchill's anti-communist views, but it captured the perception that a small democratic nation with motivated, well-led troops could inflict devastating losses on a totalitarian superpower with unmotivated, poorly led forces. Within this broader context of Finnish success against overwhelming odds, Simo Häyhä represented the ideal Finnish soldier. He was a product of Finnish rural culture, a hunter and farmer who knew the land. He was politically motivated, defending his home against foreign invasion. He was technically proficient, having spent years developing his marksmanship skills, and he was tactically intelligent, understanding that simplicity and stealth were more valuable than technological sophistication. His choice to use iron sights rather than telescopic sights was emblematic of Finnish pragmatism throughout the war. They did not have the resources to match Soviet equipment numbers. They could not win through material superiority. They won through superior tactics, superior motivation, superior understanding of the operational environment, and superior leadership. Every advantage mattered. Every inefficiency in Soviet operations was exploited. And individuals like Häyhä, who maximized their effectiveness through skill and intelligent equipment choices, became force multipliers that allowed Finland to survive. The irony was profound. The most successful sniper in military history achieved his results using the simplest possible sighting system, while military theorists and equipment designers pursued ever more sophisticated optical systems, believing that magnification and precision engineering were the path to increased lethality. Häyhä demonstrated that in the right conditions, with the right tactics, iron sights were not just adequate but superior. They were more reliable. They were less detectable. They allowed a lower shooting position, and in the hands of a skilled marksman who understood their limitations and capabilities, they were devastatingly effective. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.